Wait, where am I? There I am. I was like, what? Welcome in. Like Majakun, Griffin, or Hydra, Bright Star. Hope you guys are well today. Welcome. We will be reading more of Lord of the Rings today. We left off, let us see. We finished chapter 4, so we will be moving on to chapter 5. That I heard B for a second. But first I'll do my round of explaining what the donothon is and stuff first. For those who weren't here yesterday, I started a donathon to help with Bee's vet bills. We've been around the past couple months. You probably heard me talking about her appointments coming up and stuff like that. She's all better now. She had her final appointment this past week and they said she was all better. So now we are doing donathon to help with those bills. Last stream we managed to get to our third goal in the donathon and we unlocked the prizes of using my 1.0 model and 2.0 model for an hour, which I will do in a stream next week. And we also unlocked the karaoke stream, so that will also be next week. I'll also be revealing 2 new backgrounds next week. So next week will be very, very fun, very, very fun for us. And if we manage to hit the Discord watch along Palooza, or anything else this stream or before Monday, I will add that for our activities next week as well. Welcome in, Peanut. Welcome, welcome. It's different times for everybody. There's people all around the world hanging out here. But I suppose I will get us started on the chapter 5, The Old Forest. Frodo woke suddenly. It was still dark in the room. Mary was standing there with a candle in one hand and banging on the door with the other. "All right, what is it?" said Frodo, still shaken and bewildered. "What is it?" cried Mary. "It is time to get up. It is 4:30 and very foggy. Come on, Sam is already getting breakfast ready. Even Pippin is up. I'm just going to saddle the ponies and fetch the one that is to be the baggage carrier. Wake that sluggard Fatty. At least he must get up and see us off." Soon after 6 o'clock, the 5 hobbits were ready to start. "Come in, Cuxlane, hope you're well today." Fatty Bulger was still yawning. They stole quietly out of the house. Mary went in front, leading Aladdin pony, and took his way along a path that went through a spinney behind the house and then cut across several fields. The leaves of trees were glistening, and every twig was dripping. The grass was gray with cold dew. Everything was still, and faraway noises seemed near and clear. Fowls chattering in a yard, someone closing a door of a distant house. In their shed they found the ponies, sturdy little beasts of the kind loved by hobbits. Not speedy, but good for a long day's work. They mounted, and soon they were riding off into the mist, which seemed to open reluctantly before them and close forbiddingly behind them. After riding for about an hour, slowly and without talking, they saw the hedge looming suddenly ahead. It was tall and netted over the silver cobwebs. "How are you going to get through this?" asked Fredgar. "Follow me," said Mary, "and you will see." He turned to the left along the hedge, and soon they came to a point where it bent inwards, running along the lip of a hollow. A cutting had been made at some distance from the hedge, and went sloping gently down into the ground. It had walls of brick at the sides, which rose steadily, until suddenly they arched over and formed a tunnel that dived deep under the hedge and came out in the hollow on the other side. Here Fatty Bulger halted. "Goodbye, Frodo," he said. "I wish you were not going into the forest. I only hope you will not need rescuing before the day is out. But good luck to you, today and every day." "There are no worse things ahead than the old forest. I shall be lucky," said Frodo. "Tell Gandalf to hurry along the east road. We shall soon be back on it and going as fast as we can." "Goodbye," they cried, and rode down the slope and disappeared from Fredgar's sight into the tunnel. It was dark and damp. At the far end it was closed by a gate of thick-set iron bars. Mary got down and unlocked the gate, and when they had all passed through, he pushed it to again. It shut with a clang, and the lock clicked. The sound was ominous. "There," said Mary. "You have left the Shire, and are now outside, and on the edge of the old forest." "Are the stories about it true?" asked Pippin. "I don't know what stories you mean," Mary answered. "If you mean the old bogey stories Fatty's nurses used to tell him, about goblins and wolves and things of that sort, I should say no. At any rate, I don't believe them. But the forest is queer. Everything in it is very much more alive, more aware of what is going on, so to speak, and things are in the Shire. And the trees do not talk like strangers. They watch you. They are usually content merely to watch you, as long as daylight lasts, and don't do much. Occasionally, the more unfriendly ones may drop a branch, or stick a root out, or grasp at you with a long trailer. But at night things can be most alarming, or so I am told. I've only once or twice been in here after dark, and then only near the hedge. I thought all the trees were whispering it to each other, passing news and plots along in unintelligible language, and the branches swayed and croaked without any wind. They do say the trees do actually move, and can surround strangers and hem them in. In fact, long ago, they attacked the hedge. They came and planted themselves. I don't know if you guys can hear B. Hi, Hydra City Zone. Welcome to Help You Well Today. And Gonzo, welcome. I just remembered, though, I might have left some redeems on from last stream. I did. Let me turn those off real quick. Yeah, sweetie. Yeah, I hear you. I think B went to the bathroom and she wants to let me know. I always tell her that I'm proud of her when she finishes using her litter box. Or she may be hungry, we shall see. Because if she comes and yells at me over here, then I'll probably have to go get her some food. Let's see, where was I? In fact, long ago they attacked the hedge. They came and planted themselves right by it and leaned over it. But the hobbits came and cut down hundreds of trees and made a great bonfire in the forest and burned all the ground in a long strip east of the hedge. After that, the trees gave up the attack, but they became very unfriendly. There is still a wide, bare space not far inside where the bonfire was made. Is it only the trees that are dangerous? Asked Pippin. There are various queer things living deep in the forest, and on the far side, said Mary, or at least I have heard so, but I have never seen any of them. But something makes paths. Whenever one comes inside, one finds open tracks, but they seem to shift and change from time to time in a queer fashion. Not far from this tunnel there is, or was for a long time, the beginning of quite a broad path leading to the bonfire glade, and then on more or less in our direction, east and a little north. That is the path I am going to try and find. The hobbits now left the tunnel gate and rode across the wide hollow. On the far side was a faint path leading up on the floor of the forest, 100 yards and more beyond the hedge, but it vanished as soon as it brought them under the trees. Looking back, they could see the dark line of the hedge through the stems of the trees that were already thick about them. Looking ahead, they could see only tree trunks of innumerable sizes and shapes, straight or bent, twisted, leaning, squat or slender, smooth or gnarled and branched, and all the stems were green or gray with moss and slimy, shaggy growths. Mary alone seemed fairly cheerful. You'd better lead on and find the path, Frodo said to him. Don't let us lose one another, or forget which way the hedge lies. They picked away among the trees, and their ponies plodded along, carefully avoiding the many writhing and interlacing roots. There was no undergrowth. The ground was rising steadily. As they went forward, it seemed that the trees became taller, darker, and thicker. There was no sound except an occasional drip of moisture falling through the still leaves. For the moment, there was no whispering or movement among the branches, but they all got an uncomfortable feeling that they were being watched with disapproval, deepening to dislike and even enmity. The feeling steadily grew until they found themselves looking up quickly or glancing back over their shoulders as if they expected a sudden blow. Welcome in, V-Boy. Hope you're well today. There was not yet any sign of a path, and the trees seemed constantly to bar their way. Pippin suddenly felt that he could not bear it any longer, and without warning let out a shout. "Oi, oi!" he cried. "I am not going to do anything. Just let me pass through, will you?" The others halted, startled, but the cry fell as if muffled by a heavy curtain. Thank you for the follow, Damek. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. There was no echo or answer through the wood, though the wood seemed to become more crowded and more watchful than before. I should not shout if I were you, said Mary. It does more harm than good. Frodo began to wonder if it were possible to find a way through, and if he had been right to make the others come into this abominable wood. Mary was looking from side to side and seemed already uncertain which way to go. Pippin noticed it. It has not taken you long to lose us, he said, but at that moment Mary gave a whistle of relief and pointed ahead. Well, well, he said, these trees do shift. There is the bonfire glade in front of us, or I hope so, but the path to it seems to have moved away. The light grew clear as they went forward. Suddenly they came out of the trees and found themselves in a wide circular space. There was sky above them, blue and clear in their surprise, for down under the forest roof they had not been able to see the rising morning and the lifting of the mist. The sun was not, however, high enough yet to shine down into the clearing, though its light was on the treetops. The leaves were all thicker and greener about the edges of the glade, enclosing it with an almost solid wall. No tree grew there, only rough grass and many tall plants, stocky and faded hemlocks and wood parsley, fireweed seeding into fluffy ashes, and rampant nettles and thistles. A dreary place, but it seemed a charming and cheerful garden after the close forest. The hobbits felt encouraged and looked up hopefully at the broadening daylight in the sky. At the far side of the glade there was a break in the wall of trees and a clear path beyond it. They could see it running on into the wood, wide in places and open above, though every now and again the trees drew in and overshadowed it with their dark boughs. Up this path they rode. They were still climbing gently, and they now went much quicker and with better heart, for it seemed to them that the forest had relented and was going to let them pass unhindered after all. But after a while the air began to get hot and stuffy. The trees drew close again on either side, and they could no longer see far ahead. Now stronger than ever they felt again the ill will of the wood pressing on them. So silent was it that the fall of their ponies' hoofs, rustled on dead leaves and occasionally stumbling on hidden roots, seemed to thud in their ears. Frodo tried to sing a song to encourage them, but his voice sank to a murmur. O wanderers in the shadowed land, despair not, for though dark they stand, all woods there be must end at last, and see the open sun go past, the setting sun, the rising sun, the day's end or the day begun, for east and west all woods must fail. Fail, even as he said the word, his voice faded into silence. The air seemed heavy and the making of words worrisome. Just behind them a large branch fell from an old overhanging tree with a crash into the path. The trees seemed to close in before them. They did not like all that about ending and failing, said Mary. I should not sing any more at present. Wait till we do get to the edge, and then we'll turn and give them a rousing chorus. He spoke cheerfully, and if he felt any great anxiety, he did not show it. The others did not answer. They were depressed. A heavy weight was settling steadily on Frodo's heart, and he regretted now, with every step forward, they had ever thought of challenging the menace of the trees. He was indeed just about to stop and propose going back, if that was still possible, when things took a new turn. The path stopped climbing and became, for a while, nearly level. The dark trees drew aside, and ahead they could see the path going almost straight forward. Before them, but some distance off, there stood a green hilltop, treeless, rising like a bald head out of an encircling wood. The path seemed to be making directly for it. Hi, Bad Request. Will come and help you all today. They now hurried forward again, delighted with the thought of climbing out for a while above the roof of the forest. The path dipped, and then again began to climb upwards, leading them at last to the foot of the steep hillside. There it left the trees and faded into the turf. The wood stood all round the hill like thick hair that ended sharply in a circle round a shaven crown. The hobbits led their ponies up, winding round and round until they reached the top. There they stood and gazed about them. The air was gleaming and sunlit, but hazy, and they could not see to any great distance. Near at hand the mist was now almost gone, though here and there it lay in hollows of the wood, and to the south of them, out of a deep fold cutting right across the forest, the fog still rose like steam or wisps of white smoke. "That," said Merry, pointing with his hand, "that is the line of the Withy Windle. Comes down, so funny name, comes down out of the downs and flows southwest through the mist of the forest to join the Brandywine below Haysend. We don't want to go that way. The Withywindle Valley is said to be the queerest part of the whole wood, the center from which all the queerness comes, as it were." The others looked in the direction that Mary pointed out, but they could see little but mists over the damp and deep-cut valley, and beyond it the southern half of the forest faded from view. The sun on the hilltop was now getting hot. It must have been almost 11 o'clock, but the autumn haze still prevented them from seeing much in other directions. In the west they could not make out either the line of the hedge or the valley of the Brandywine beyond it. Northward, there they looked most hopefully. They could see nothing that might be the line of the Great East Road, for which they were making. They were on the island of a sea of trees, and their horizon was veiled. On the southeastern side the ground fell very steeply, as if the slopes of the hill were continued far down under the trees, like island shores that really are the sides of a mountain rising out of deep waters. They sat on the green edge and looked out over the woods below them, while they ate their midday meal. As the sun rose and past noon, they glimpsed far off in the east the gray-green lines of the downs that lay beyond the old forest on that side. That cheered them greatly, for it was good to see a sight of anything beyond the wood's borders, though they did not mean to go that way, if they could help it. The Barrow Downs had as sinister a reputation in hobbit legend as the forest itself. At length they made up their minds to go on again. The path that had brought them to the hill reappeared on the northward side, but they had not followed it far before they became aware that it was bending steadily to the right. Soon it began to descend rapidly, and they guessed that it must actually be heading towards the Withywindle Valley, not at all the direction they wished to take. After some discussion they decided to leave the misleading path and strike northward, for although they had not been able to see it from the hilltop, the road must lie that way, and it could not be many miles off. Also northward, and to the left of the path, the land seemed to be drier and more open, climbing up to slopes where the trees were thinner, and pines and firs replaced oaks and ashes and other strange and nameless trees of the denser wood. At first, their choice seemed to be good. They got along at a fair speed, though whenever they got a glimpse of the sun in an open glade, they seemed unaccountably to have veered eastwards. But after a time, the trees began to close in again, and where they had appeared from a distance to be thinner and less tangled, then deep folds in the ground were discovered unexpectedly, like the ruts of great giant wheels, or wide moats and sunken roads long disused and choked with brambles. These lay usually right across their line of march, and could only be crossed by scrambling down and out again, which was troublesome and difficult with their ponies. Each time they climbed down they found the hollow filled with thick bushes and matted undergrowth, which somehow would not yield to the left, but only gave way when they turned to the right, and they had to go some distance along the bottom before they could find a way up the further bank. Each time they clambered out, the trees seemed deeper and darker, and always to the left and upwards it was most difficult to find a way, and they were forced to the right and downwards. After an hour or two they had lost all clear sense of direction. Though they knew well enough they had ceased to go northward at all, they were being headed off and were simply following a course chosen for them, eastwards and southwards, into the heart of the forest and not out of it. The afternoon was wearing away when they scrambled and stumbled into a fold that was wider and deeper than any they had yet met. It was so steep and overhung that it proved impossible to climb out of it again, either forwards or backwards, without leaving their ponies and their baggage behind. All they could do was to follow the fold downwards. The ground grew soft and in places boggy. Springs appeared in the banks, and soon they found themselves following a brook that trickled and babbled through a weedy bed. Then the ground began to fall rapidly, and the brook, growing strong and noisy, flowed and leapt swiftly downhill. They were in a deep, dim-lit gully, overarched by trees high above them. No problem, Gabriel. Hello. Hope that work goes by fast. After stumbling along for some way along the stream, they came quite suddenly out of the gloom. As if through a gate, they saw the sunlight before them. Coming to an opening, they found that they had made their way down through a cleft in a high, steep bank, almost a cliff. Hello, Caliacini. What can I help you with today? At its feet was a wide space of grass and reeds, and in the distance could be glimpsed another bank almost as steep. A golden afternoon of late sunshine lay warm and drowsy upon the hidden land between. In the midst of it there wound lazily a dark river of brown water, bordered with ancient willows, arched over the willows, blocked with fallen willows, and flecked with thousands of faded willow leaves. The air was thick with them, fluttering yellow from the branches, for there was a warm and gentle breeze blowing softly in the valley, and the reeds were rustling, and the willow boughs were creaking. "Well, now I have at least some notion of where we are," said Mary. "We have come almost in the opposite direction of which we intended. This is the river Withywindle. I will go on and explore." He passed out into the sunshine and disappeared into the long grasses. After a while he reappeared and reported that there was fairly solid ground between the cliff foot and the river. In some places firm turf went down to the water's edge. What's more, he said, there seems to be something like a footpath winding along on this side of the river. If we turn left and follow it, we shall be bound to come out on the east side of the forest eventually. "I dare say," said Pippin, "that is, if the track goes on so far, and does not simply lead us into a bog and leave us there. Who made the track, do you suppose, and why? I'm sure it was not for our benefit. I am getting very suspicious of this forest and everything in it, and I begin to believe all the stories about it. And have you any idea how far eastward we should have to go?" "No," said Mary, "I haven't. I don't know in the least how far down the Withywindle we are, or who could possibly come here often enough to make a path along it. But there's no other way out that I can see or think of." "Hi, Adam. Welcome in. Help you all today." There being nothing else for it, they filed out, and Mary led them to the path that he had discovered. Everywhere the reeds and grasses were lush and tall, in places far above their heads. But once found, the path was easy to follow, as it turned and twisted, picking out the sonder ground among the bogs and pools. Here and there it passed over the rills, running down gullies into the Withywindle, out of the higher forest lands, and at these points there were tree trunks or bundles of brushwood laid carefully across. The hobbits began to feel very hot. There were armies of flies, all kinds, buzzing round their ears. The afternoon sun was burning on their backs. At last they suddenly came into a thin shade. Great grey branches reached across the path. Each step forward became more reluctant than the last. Sleepiness seemed to be creeping out of the ground and up their legs, and falling softly out of the air upon their heads and eyes. Frodo felt his chin go down and his head nod. Just in front of him, Pippin fell forward on his knees. Frodo halted. "It's no good," he heard Mary saying. Can't go another step without rest. Must have nap. It's cool under the willows. Less flies. Thank you for the sippy and the stretch. I'll do that real quick here. There it is. Do a stretch. I just remembered that I had forgotten to put the thumbnail on YouTube for the stream, so I'll do that really quick. Really quick. And where's it? There it is. There we go. And we shall continue. Frodo did not like the sound of this. Come on, he cried. We can't have a nap yet. We must get clear of the forest first. But the others were too far gone to care. Beside them, Sam stood yawning and blinking stupidly. Suddenly, Frodo himself felt sleep overwhelming him. His head swam. There now seemed hardly a sound in the air. The flies had stopped buzzing. Only a gentle noise on the edge of hearing, a soft fluttering of a song half-whispered, seemed to stir in the boughs above. He lifted his heavy eyes and saw, leaning over him, a huge willow tree, old and hoary. Thank you for the I know how to speak. Thank you, Lakoza. That's what I meant. I almost said thank you for the follow. Thank you, Lakoza. Thank you. Thank you for the alert, John. Where was I? Enormous it looked, its sprawling branches going up, like reaching arms, with many long-fingered hands, its knotted and twisted trunk gaping in wide fissures, but creaking faintly as the boughs moved. The leaves fluttering against the bright sky dazzled him, and he toppled over, lying where he fell upon the grass. Merry and Pippin dragged themselves forward and lay down their backs to the willow trunk. Behind them, the great cracks gaped wide to receive them as the tree swayed and creaked. They looked up at the gray and yellow leaves, moving softly against the light and singing. They shut their eyes, and it seemed that they could almost hear words, cool words, saying something about water and sleep. They gave themselves up to the spell and fell fast asleep at the foot of the great gray willow. Frodo lay for a while, fighting with the sleep that was overpowering him. Then, with an effort, he struggled to his feet again. He felt a compelling desire for cool water. "Wait for me, Sam," he stammered. "Must bathe feet a minute." Half in a dream, he wandered forward to the riverside of the tree, where great winding roots grew out into the stream, like gnarled dragonets straining down to drink. He settled one of those and paddled his hot feet in the cool brown water, and there he too suddenly fell asleep with his back against the tree. Sam sat down and scratched his head, and yawned like a cavern. He was worried. The afternoon was getting late, and he thought this sudden sleepiness uncanny. "There's more behind this than sun and warm air," he muttered to himself. "I don't like this great big tree. I don't trust it. Hark at it singing about sleep now. This won't do at all." He pulled himself to his feet and staggered off to see what had become of the ponies. He found that two had wandered on a good way along the path, and he had just caught them and brought them back towards the others when he heard two noises, one loud and the other soft, but very clear. One was a splash of something heavy falling into the water. The other was a noise like the snick of a lock when a door quietly closes fast. He rushed back to the bank. Frodo was in the water close to the edge, and the great tree root seemed to be over him and holding him down. But he was not struggling. Sam gripped him by the jacket and dragged him from under the root, and then with difficulty hauled him on his back. Almost at once he woke and coughed and sputtered. "Do you know, Sam," he said at length, "the beastly tree threw me in. I felt it. The big root just twisted around and tipped me in." "You were dreaming, I expect, Mr. Frodo," said Sam. "You shouldn't sit in such a place, if you feel sleepy." "What about the others?" Frodo asked. "I wonder what sort of dreams they are having." They went round to the other side of the tree, and then Sam understood the click that he heard. Pippin had vanished. The crack by which he had laid himself had closed together, so that not a chink could be seen. Merry was trapped. Another crack had closed about his waist. His legs lay outside, and the rest of him was inside a dark opening, the edges of which gripped like a pair of pincers. Frodo and Sam beat first upon the tree trunk where Pippin had lain. They then struggled frantically to pull open the jaws of the crack and that held poor Merry. It was quite useless. "What a foul thing to happen!" cried Frodo wildly. "Why did we ever come to this dreadful forest? I wish we were all back at Crick Hollow." He kicked the tree with all his strength, heedless of his own feet. A hardly perceptible shiver ran through the stem, and up the branches and leaves rustled and whispered, but with a sound now of faint and far-off laughter. "Suppose we haven't got an axe among our luggage, Mr. Frodo?" asked Sam. "I brought a little hatchet for chopping firewood," said Frodo. "That wouldn't be much use." "Wait a minute," cried Sam, struck by an idea suggested by firewood. "We might do something with fire." "We might," said Frodo doubtfully. "We might succeed in roasting Pippin alive inside." "We might try to hurt or frighten this tree to begin with," said Sam fiercely. "If it don't let them go, I'll have it down, if I have to gnaw it." He ran to the ponies, and before long came back with 2 tinder boxes and a hatchet. Quickly they gathered dry grass and leaves and bits of bark, and made a pile of broken twigs and chopped sticks. Those they heaped against the trunk on the far side of the tree from the prisoners. As soon as Sam had struck a spark from the tinder, it kindled the dry grass, and a flurry of flame and smoke went up. The twigs crackled. Little fingers of fire licked against the smoke went up. Little fingers of fire licked against the dry, scored rind of the ancient tree and scorched it. A tremor ran through the whole willow. The leaves seemed to hiss above their heads with a sound of pain and anger. A loud scream came from Merry, and far from inside the tree they heard Pippin give a muffled yell. "Put it out! Put it out!" cried Merry. "He'll squeeze me in too if you don't. He says so." "Who? What?" shouted Frodo, rushing round to their side of the tree. "Put it out! Put it out!" begged Merry. The branches of the willow began to sway violently. There was a sound as of a wind rising and spreading outwards of the branches of all the other trees round about, as though they had dropped a stone into the quiet slumber of the river valley, and set up ripples of anger that ran out over the whole forest. Sam kicked at the little fire and stamped out the sparks, but Frodo, without any clear idea of why he did so, or what he hoped for, ran along the path crying, "Help! Help! Help!" It seemed to him that he could hardly hear the sound of his own shrill voice. It was blown away from him by the willow wind and drowned in a clamor of leaves as soon as the words left his mouth. He felt desperate, lost, and witless. Suddenly he stopped. There was an answer, or so he thought, but it seemed to come from behind him, away down the path further back in the forest. He turned round and listened, and soon there could be no doubt. Someone was singing a song. A deep, glad voice was singing carelessly and happily, but it was singing nonsense. "Hey doll, merry doll, ring-a-ding-de-lo, ring-a-dong, hop along, fall the willow, tom bomb jolly tom, tom bombadilio." Half hopeful and half afraid of some new danger, Frodo and Sam now both stood still. Suddenly, out of a long string of nonsense words, or so they seemed, the voice rose up loud and clear and burst into this song. Hey, come, merry doll, dearie doll, my darling. Light goes the weather wind and the feathered starling. Down along under hill shining in the sunlight, waiting on the doorstep for the cold starlight. There my pretty lady is, river woman's daughter, slender as the willow wand, clearer than the water. Old Tom Bombadil, water lilies bringing, come hopping home again, can you hear him singing? Hey, come, merry doll, dairy doll, and merry o, goldberry, merry yellow berry o. Poor old willow man, you tuck your roots away. Tom's in a hurry now, evening will follow day. Tom's going home again, water lilies bringing. Hey, come, dairy doll, can you hear me singing? Frodo and Sam stood as if enchanted. The wind puffed out. The leaves hung silently again on stiff branches. There was another burst of song, and then suddenly, hopping and dancing along the path, there appeared above the reeds an old battered hat with a tall crown and a long blue feather stuck in the band. With another hop and a bound there came into view a man, or so it seemed. At any rate, he was too large and heavy for a hobbit. He was not quite tall enough for one of the big people, though he made noise enough for one, stomping along with great yellow boots on his thick legs, and charging through grass and rushes like a cow going down to drink. He had a blue coat and a long brown beard. His eyes were blue and bright, and his face was red as a ripe apple, but creased into 100 wrinkles of laughter. In his hands he carried a large leaf, as on a tray a small pile of white water lilies. "Help!" cried Frodo and Sam, running towards him with their hands stretched out. "Whoa, whoa, steady there!" cried the old man, holding up one hand, and they stopped short as if they had been struck stiff. "Now, my little fellows, where be you a-going to, puffing like a bellows? What's the matter here, then? Do you know who I am? I'm Tom Bombadil. Tell me what's your trouble. Tom's in a hurry now. Don't you crush my lilies." "Welcome in, Gungheim. Hope you're well today." "My friends are caught in the willow tree," cried Frodo breathlessly. "Master Merry's being squeezed in a crack," cried Sam. "What?" shouted Tom Bombadil, leaping up into the air. "Old Man Willow? Not worse than that, eh? That can soon be mended. I know that tune for him. Old grey willow man, I'll freeze his marrow cold. If he don't behave himself, I'll sing his roots off. I'll sing a wind up and blow leaf and branch away, Old Man Willow." Setting down his lilies carefully on the grass, he ran to the tree. There he saw Mary's feet still sticking out. The rest had hardly been drawn farther inside. Tom put his mouth to the crack and began singing into it in a low voice. They could not catch the words, but evidently Mary was aroused. His legs began to kick. Tom sprang away, and breaking off a hanging branch, smote the side of the willow with it. "You let them out again, Old Man Willow," he said. "What are you thinking of? You should not be waking. Eat earth, dig deep, drink water, go to sleep. Bombadil is talking." He then seized Mary's feet and drew him out of the suddenly widening crack. There was a tearing creak, and the other crack split open, and out of it Pippin sprang, as if he had been kicked. Then, with a loud snap, both cracks closed fast again. A shudder ran through the tree from root to tip. Then complete silence fell. "Thank you," said the hobbits, one after the other. Tom Bombadil burst out laughing. "Well, my little fellows," said he, stooping so that he peered into their faces, "you shall come home with me. The table is all laden with yellow cream, honeycomb, and white bread and butter. Goldberry is waiting. Time enough for questions around the supper table. You follow after me as quick as you are able." With that he picked up his lilies, and then with a beckoning wave of his hand went hopping and dancing along the path eastward, still singing loudly and nonsensically. Too surprised and too relieved to talk, the hobbits followed after him as fast as they could. But that was not fast enough. Tom soon disappeared in front of them. The noise of his singing got fainter and fainter away. Suddenly his voice came floating back to them in a loud "Hello!" "Hop along, my little friends, to the window. Tom's going on ahead, candles for to kindle. Down west sinks the sun, soon you will be groping. When the night shadows fall, then the doors will open. Out of the window panes light will twinkle yellow. Fear no older black, heed no hoary willow. Fear neither root nor bough, Tom goes on before you. Hey now, merry doll will be waiting for you." I've been welcome and well today. After that, the hobbits heard no more. Almost at once the sun seemed to sink into the trees behind them. They thought of the slanting light of evening glittering on the Brandywine River, and the windows of Buckleberry beginning to gleam with hundreds of lights. Great shadows fell across them, trunks and branches of trees hung dark and threatening over the path. White mist began to rise and curl on the surface of the river, and stray about the roots of the trees upon its borders. Out of the very ground at their feet a shadowy steam arose and mingled with the swiftly falling dusk. It became difficult to follow the path, and they were very tired. Their legs seemed leaden. Strange furtive noises ran among the bushes and reeds on either side of them, and if they looked up to the pale sky, they caught sight of queer gnarled and knobby faces that gloomed dark against the twilight and leered down at them from high bank and the edges of the wood. They began to feel that all this country was unreal, and that they were stumbling through an ominous dream that led to no awakening. Just as they felt their feet slowing down to a standstill, they noticed that the ground was gently rising. The water began to murmur. In the darkness they caught the white glimmer of foam where the river flowed over a short fall. And then suddenly the trees came to an end and the mists were left behind. They suddenly stepped out from the forest and found a wide sweep of grass welling up before them. The river, now small and swift, was leaping merrily down to meet them, glinting here and there in the light of the stars, which were already shining in the sky. The grass under their feet was smooth and short, as if it had been mown or shaven. The eaves of the forest behind were clipped, and trim as the hedge. The path was now plain before them, well tended and bordered with stone. It wound up on the top of a grassy knoll, now grey under the pale starry night, and there, still high above them on a further slope, they saw the twinkling lights of a house. Down again the path went, and then up again, up a long smooth hillside of turf towards the light. Suddenly a wide yellow beam flowed out brightly from a door that was opened. There was Tom Bombadil's house before them, up, down, under hill. Behind it a steep shoulder of the land lay grey and bare, and beyond that the dark shapes of Burrow Downs stalked away in the eastern night. They all hurried forward, hobbits and ponies, already half their weariness, and all their fears had fallen from them. "Hey, come merry doll," rolled out a great song to greet them. "Hey, come merry doll, hop along my hearties, hobbits, ponies all, we are fond of parties. Now let the fun begin, let us sing together." Then another clear voice, as young and as ancient as the spring, like the song of the glad water flowing down into the night from the bright morning in the hills, came falling like silver to meet them. "Now let the song begin, let us sing together, of sun, stars, moon and mist, rain and cloudy weather. Light on the budding leaf, dew on the feather, wind on the open hill, bells on the heather, reeds by the shady pool, lilies on the water, old Tom Bombadil and the river daughter." And with the last song the hobbits stood upon the threshold, and a golden light was all about them. That was chapter 6. I'll take a sippy real quick, and then we shall start chapter 7 in the House of Tom Bombadil. If you are unfamiliar with Lord of the Rings, this is the strangest character in the entire series. So if you're confused, don't worry. I'm pretty sure everybody is also confused. I haven't looked into if Tolkien ever really explained what or who Tom Bombadil actually is. Let me see how long this chapter is. Okay, not super long. Okay. The four hobbits stepped over the wide stone threshold and stood still, blinking. They were in a long, low room filled with the light of lamps swinging from the beams of the roof, and on the table of a dark polished wood stood many candles, tall and yellow, burning brightly. In a chair at the far side of the room, facing the outer door, sat a woman. Her long yellow hair rippled down her shoulders. Her gown was green, green as young reeds, shot with silver like beads of dew, and her belt was of gold, shaped like a chain of flag lilies, set with the pale blue eyes of forget-me-nots. About her feet in wide vessels of green and brown earthenware, white water lilies were floating, so that she seemed to be enthroned in the midst of a pool. "Enter, good guest," she said, and as she spoke they knew that it was her clear voice they had heard singing. They came a few timid steps further into the room and began to bow low, feeling strangely surprised and awkward, like folk that, knocking at a cottage door to beg for a drink of water, have been answered by a fair young elf queen clad in living flowers. But before they could say anything she sprang lightly up and over the lily bowls, and ran laughing towards them. As she ran her gown rustled softly like the wind in the flowering borders of a river. "Come, dear folk," she said, taking Frodo by the hand, "laugh and be merry. I am Goldberry, daughter of the river." Then lightly she passed them, and closing the door she turned her back to it, with her white arms spread out across it. "Let us shut out the night," she said, "for you are still afraid, perhaps, of mist and tree shadows and deep water and untamed things. Fear nothing, for tonight you are under the roof of Tom Bombadil." The hobbits looked at her in wonder, and she looked at each of them and smiled. "Fair Lady Goldberry," said Frodo at last, feeling his heart moved with a joy that he did not understand. He stood as he had at times stood, enchanted by fair elven voices, but the spell was now laid upon him with different. Less keen and lofty was the delight, but deeper and nearer to mortal heart, marvellous and yet not strange. "Fair Lady Goldberry," he said again, "now the joy that was hidden in the songs we heard is made plain to me. O slender as a willow wand, O clearer than clear water, O reed by the living pool, fair river daughter, O springtime and summertime and spring again after, O wind on the waterfall and the leaves' laughter." Suddenly he stopped and stammered, overcome with surprise to hear himself saying such things, but Goldberry laughed. "Welcome," she said. "I had not heard that folk of the Shire were so sweet-tongued, but I see you are an elf friend, and light in your eyes said, the ring in your voice tells it. This is a merry meeting. Sit now and wait for the master of the house. He will not be long. He is tending your tired beasts." The hobbit sat down gladly in a low rush-seated chairs, while Goldberry brushed herself about the table, and their eyes followed her, for the slender grace of her movement filled them with quiet delight. From somewhere behind the house came the sound of singing. Every now and again they caught, among many a dairy doll and a merry doll and a ring-a-ding-dillo, the repeated words, "Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow." "Fair lady," said Frodo again after a while, "tell me, if my asking does not seem foolish, who is Tom Bombadil?" "He is," said Goldberry, staying her swift movements and smiling. Frodo looked at her questioningly. "He is, as you have seen him," she said, in answer of his look. "He is the master of wood, water, and hill." "Then all this strange land belongs to him?" "No, indeed," she answered, and her smile faded. "That would indeed be a burden," she added in a low voice, as if to herself. "The trees and the grasses and all things growing or living in this land belong each to themselves. Tom Bombadil is the master. No one has ever caught old Tom walking in the forest, wading in the water, leaping on the hilltops under light and shadow. He has no fear. Tom Bombadil is master." The door opened, and in came Tom Bombadil. He had now no hat, and his thick brown hair was crowned with autumn leaves. He laughed, and going to Goldberry took her hand. "Here's my pretty lady," he said, bowing to the hobbits. "Here's my Goldberry, clothed all in silver green, with flowers in her girdle. Is the table laden? I see yellow cream and honeycomb and white bread and butter, milk trees and green herbs and ripe berries gathered. Is that enough for us? Is the supper ready?" "It is," said Goldberry, "but the guests perhaps are not." Tom clapped his hands and cried, "Tom, Tom, your guests are tired, and you had near forgotten. Come now, my merry friends, and Tom will refresh you. You shall clean grimy hands and wash your weary faces, cast off your muddy cloaks, and comb out your tangles." He opened the door, and they followed him down a short passage and around a sharp turn. They came to a low room with a sloping roof, a penthouse it seemed, built on the north end of the house. Its walls were of clean stone, but they were mostly covered with green hanging mats and yellow curtains. The floor was flagged and strewn with fresh green rushes. There were 4 deep mattresses, each piled with white blankets, laid on the floor along one side. Against the opposite wall was a long bench laden with wide earthenware basins. Beside it stood brown ears filled with water, some cold, some steaming hot. There were soft green slippers set ready beside each bed. Hello, Lovelet, welcome and help you all today. If you can write, then you usually can know how to read. But well, my hands look like this, so hers can look like this. If you know that meme. I might have seen it before. I know what you mean. But Tom is a mysterious being. Like, how Goldberry was calling Tom Bombadil the Master. It's kind of theorized within those who enjoy the world of Middle-earth that he's like some kind of deity in this series, but no one can ever quite tell what's going on with him. Before long, washed and refreshed, the hobbits were seated at the table, 2 on each side, while at either end sat Goldberry and the Master. It was a long and merry meal, though the hobbits ate it only famished hobbits. As only famished hobbits can eat, there is no lack. The drink in their drinking bowls seemed to be clear cold water, yet it went to their hearts like wine and set free their voices. The guests became suddenly aware that they were singing merrily, as if it was easier and more natural than talking. At last Tom and Goldberry rose and cleared the table swiftly. The guests were commanded to sit quiet, and were set in chairs, each with a footstool to his tired feet. There was a fire in the wide hearth before them, and it was burning with a sweet smell as if it was built of apple wood. When everything was set in order, all the lights in the room were put out, except one lamp and a pair of candles at each end of the chimney self. Then Goldberry came and stood before them holding a candle, and she wished them each a good night and deep sleep. "Have peace now," she said, "until the morning. Heed no nightly noises, for nothing passes door and window here save moonlight and starlight and the wind off the hilltop. Good night." She passed out of the room with a glimmer and a rustle. The sound of her footsteps was like a stream falling gently downhill over cool stones in the quiet of night. Tom sat on a while beside them in silence, while each of them tried to muster the courage to ask one of the many questions he had meant to ask at supper. Sleep gathered on their eyelids. At last Frodo spoke. "Did you hear me calling Master, or was it just chance that brought you at that moment?" Tom stirred like a man shaken out of a pleasant dream. What?" said he. "Did I hear you calling?" "Nay, I did not hear. I was busy singing. Just chance brought me then, if chance you call it. It was no plan of mine, though I was waiting for you. We heard news of you, and learned that you were wandering. We guessed you'd come ere long down to the water. All paths lead that way, down to Withywindle. Old Grey Willow Man, he's a mighty singer, and it's hard for little folk to escape his cunning mazes. But Tom had an errand there, and he dared not hinder." Tom nodded as if sleep was taking him again. Then he went on in a soft singing voice. "I had errand there, gathering water lilies, green leaves and lilies, white to please my pretty lady. The last ere the year's end, to keep them from the winter, to flower by her pretty feet till the snows are melted. Each year at summer's end I go to find them for her, in a wide pool deep and clear, far down Withywindle. There they open first in spring, and there they linger latest. By the pool long ago I found the river daughter, fair young Goldberry, singing in the rushes. Sweet was her singing then, and her heart was beating." He opened his eyes and looked at them with a sudden glint of blue. "And that proved well for you, for now I shall no longer go down deep again along the forest water, not while the year is old, nor shall I be passing Old Man Willow's house this side of springtime, not till the merry spring, when the river daughter dances down the Withy path to bathe in the water." Hello, Emily and Martin. Welcome and hope you guys are well today. He fell silent again, but Frodo could not help asking one more question, the one he most desired to have answered. "Tell us, Master," he said, "about the Willow Man. What is he? I have never heard of him before." "No, don't," said Merry and Pippin together, sitting suddenly upright. "Not now, not until the morning." "That is right," said the old man. "Now is the time for resting. Some things are ill to hear when the world's in shadow. Sleep till the morning light, rest on the pillow. Heed no nightly noise, fear no grey willow. And with that he took down the lamp and blew it out, and grasping a candle in either hand, he led them out of the room. Their mattresses and pillows were soft as down, and his blankets were of white wool. They had hardly laid themselves on the deep beds and drawn the light covers over them before they were asleep. In the dead night Frodo lay in a dream without light. Then he saw the young moon rising. Under its thin light there loomed before him a black wall of rock, pierced by a dark arch like a great gate. It seemed to Frodo that he was lifted up, and passing over he saw that the rock wall was a circle of hills, and that within it was a plain, and in the midst of the plain stood a pinnacle of stone, like a vast tower, but not made by hands. On its top stood the figure of a man. The moon, as it rose, seemed to hang for a moment above his head and glistened in his white hair as the wind stirred it. Up from the dark plain below came the crying of fell voices and the howling of many wolves. Suddenly a shadow, like the shape of great wings, passed across the moon. The figure lifted his arms, and a light flashed from the staff as he wielded. A mighty eagle swept down and bore him away. The voices wailed and the wolves yammered. There was a noise like a strong wind blowing, and on it was borne the sound of hoofs galloping, galloping, galloping from the east. Black riders, thought Frodo, as he wakened, with the sound of the hoofs still echoing in his mind. He wondered if he would ever again have the courage to leave the safety of these stone walls. He lay motionless, still listening, but all was now silent, and at last he turned and fell asleep again, or wandered into some other unremembered dream. At his side Pippin lay dreaming pleasantly, but a change came over his dreams, and he turned and groaned. Suddenly he woke, or thought he had waked, and yet still heard in the darkness the sound that had disturbed his dream. Tip, tap, squeak. The noise was like branches fretting in the wind, 2 twig fingers scraping wall and window. Creak, creak, creak. He wondered if there were willow trees close to the house, and suddenly he had a dreadful feeling that he was not in an ordinary house at all, but inside the willow, and listening to the horrible dry creaking voice laughing at him again. He sat up and felt the soft pillows yield to his hands, and he lay down again relieved. He seemed to hear the echoes of words in his ears. Fear nothing, have peace until the morning, heed no nightly noises. And then he went to sleep again. It was the sound of the water that Merry heard falling into his quiet sleep, water streaming down gently, and then spreading irresistibly all round the house into a dark shoreless pool. It gurgled under the walls, and was rising slowly but surely. I shall be drowned, he thought. It will find its way in, and then I shall drown. He felt that he was lying in a soft, slimy bog, and springing up, he felt his foot on the corner of a cold, hard flagstone. And then he remembered there he was, and lay down again. He seemed to hear, or remember hearing, nothing past the doors or windows, save moonlight and starlight and the wind off the hilltop. A little breath of sweet air moved the curtain. He breathed deep and fell asleep again. As far as he could remember, Sam slept through the night, in deep content, if logs were contented. They woke up all four at once in the morning light. Tom was moving about the room, whistling like a starling. When he heard them stir, he clapped his hands and cried, "Hey, come, merry doll, dairy doll, my hearties!" He drew back the yellow curtains, and the hobbits saw that these had covered the windows on either end of the room, one looking east and the other looking west. They leapt up refreshed. Frodo ran to the eastern window, and found himself looking into a kitchen garden grey with dew. He had half expected to see turf right up to the walls, turf all pocketed with hoofprints. Actually, his view was screened by a tall line of beans on poles, but above and far beyond them the grey top of the hill loomed up against the sunrise. It was a pale morning in the east. Behind, long clouds, like lines of soiled wool, stained red at the edges, lay glimmering deeps of yellow. The sky spoke of rain to come, but the light was broadening quickly, and the red flowers on the beans began to glow against the wet-green leaves. Pippin looked out of the western window, down into a pool of mist. The forest was hidden under a fog. It was like looking down on to a sloping cloud roof from above. There was a fold or channel where the mist was broken into the plumes and billows in the valley of the winter window. Then stream ran down the hill on the left and vanished into the white shadows. Near at hand was a flower garden and a clipped hedge silver-netted, and beyond that grey-shaven grass pale with dewdrops, There was no willow tree to be seen. "Good morning, merry friends," cried Tom, opening the castern window wide. Cool air flowed in and had a rainy smell. "Sun won't show her face much today, I'm thinking. I've been walking wide, leaping on the hilltops since the gray dawn began. Noise, wind, and weather, wet grass underfoot, wet sky above me. I wakened Goldberry singing under window, but not wakes hobbit folk in the early morning. In the night little folk wake up in the darkness and sleep after light has come. Ring-a-ding-de-lo, wake now, my merry friends, forget the nightly noises. Ring-a-ding-de-lo, dell, dairy dell, my hearties. If you come soon, you'll find breakfast on the table. If you come late, you'll get grass and rainwater." Needless to say, not that Tom's threat sounded very serious, the hobbits came soon, and left the table late, and only when it was beginning to look rather empty. Neither Tom nor Goldberry were there. Tom could be heard about the house, clattering in the kitchen and up and down the stairs, and singing here and there outside. The room looked westward over the mist-clouded valley, and the window was open. Water dripped down from the thatched eaves above. Before they had finished breakfast, the clouds had joined into an unbroken roof, and a slight gray rain came softly and steadily down. Behind its deep curtain the forest was completely veiled. As they looked out of the window, there came falling gently, as if it was flowing down the rain out of the sky, the clear voice of Goldberry singing up above them. They could hear few words, and it seemed plain to them that the song was a rain song, as sweet as showers on dry hills, that told the tale of the river from the spring and the highlands of the sea far below. The hobbits listened with delight, and Frodo was glad in his heart, and blessed the kindly weather, because it delayed them from departing. They thought of going had been heavy upon him from the moment he awoke, but he guessed now that they would not go further that day. The upper wind settled in the west, and deeper and wetter clouds rolled up to spill their laden rain on the bare heads of the downs. Nothing could be seen all around the house but falling water. Frodo stood near the open door and watched the white chalky path near the little river of milk and go bubbling away down into the valley. Tom Bombadil came trotting round the corner of the house, waving his arms as if he was warding off the rain, and indeed when he sprang over the threshold he seemed quite dry except for his boots. These he took off and put in the chimney corner. Then he sat in the larger chair and called the hobbits to gather round him. "This is Goldberry's washing day," he said, "and her autumn cleaning, too wet for the hobbit folk. Let them rest while they are able. It's a good day for long tales, for questions and for answers, so Tom will start the talking." He then told them many remarkable stories, sometimes half as if speaking to himself, sometimes looking at them suddenly with a bright blue eye under his deep brows. Often his voice would turn to song, and he would get out of his chair and dance about. He told them tales of bees and flowers, the ways of trees and the strange creatures of the forest, about the evil things and good things, things friendly and things unfriendly, cruel things and kind things, and secrets hidden under brambles. As they listened, they began to understand the lives of the forest, apart from themselves, indeed feel themselves as the strangers where all other things were at home. Moving constantly in and out of his talk was Old Man Willow, and Frodo learned now enough to content him, indeed more than enough, for it was not comfortable lore. Tom's words laid bare in hearts of the trees and their thoughts, which were often dark and strange, and filled with a hatred of things that go free upon the earth, gnawing, biting, breaking, hacking, burning, destroyers and usurpers. It was not called the Old Forest without reason, for it was indeed ancient, a survivor of vast forgotten woods, and in there lived yet, aging no quicker than the hills, the fathers of trees, remembering times when they were lords. The countless years had filled them with pride and rooted wisdom, and with malice, but none were more dangerous than the great willow. His heart was rotten, but his strength was green. And he was cunning, and the master of winds, and his song and thought ran through the woods on both sides of the river. His cray thirsty dew power out of the earth, and spread like fine root threads in the ground, and invisible twig fingers in the air,
until it had under its domain nearly all the trees in the forest from the hedge of the downs. Suddenly Tom's talk left the woods and went leaping up the young stream, over bubbling waterfalls, over pebbles and worn rocks, among small flowers and close grass and wet crannies, wandering at last up to the downs. They heard the great barrows, and the green mounds, and the stone rings upon the hills and in the hollows among the hills. Sheep were bleating in flocks, green walls and white walls rose. There were fortresses on the heights. Kings of little kingdoms fought together, and the young sun shone like fire on the red metal of their new and greedy swords. There was victory and defeat, the towers fell, fortresses were burned, and the flames went up into the sky. Gold was piled on the biers, and dead kings and queens, and mounds covered them, and the stone doors were shut, and the grass grew all over. Sheep walked for a while biting the grass, and soon the hills were empty again. Shadow came out of the dark places far away, and the bones were stirred in the mounds. Borrow waits walked in the hollow places, with a clink of rings on cold fingers, and gold chains in the wind. Some rings grinned out of the ground like broken teeth in the moonlight. The hobbit shuddered. Even in the Shire, the rumour of the Barrow waits and the Barrow Downs beyond the forest had been heard, but it was not a tale that any hobbit liked to listen to, even by a comfortable fireside far away. These four now suddenly remembered what the joy of this house had driven from their minds, the house of Tom Bombadil nestled under the very shoulder of those dreaded hills. They lost the thread of his tale and shifted uneasily, looking aside at one another. When they caught his words again, they found that he had now wandered into strange regions beyond their memory and beyond their waking thought, into times when the world was wider and the sea flowed straight to the western shore, and still on and back Tom went singing on into ancient starlight, when only the elf sires were awake. Then suddenly he stopped, and they saw that he nodded as if he was falling asleep. The hobbit sat still before him and chanted as if, and it seemed as if, under the spell of his words, the wind had gone, the clouds had dried up, and the day had been withdrawn, and the darkness had came from east and west, and all the sky was filled with the light of white stars. Whether the morning or evening of day, or the many days had passed, Frodo could not tell. He did not feel either hungry or tired, only filled with wonder. The stars shone through the window. Hi, sweetie. The stars shone through the window, and the silence of the heavens seemed to be round him. He spoke at last of his wonder and a sudden fear of that silence. "Who are you, master?" he asked. What?" said Tom, sitting up, and his eyes glinting in the gloom. "Don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer. Tell me, who are you, alone, yourself, and nameless? But you are young, and I am old, eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people, and he saw the little people arriving. He was here before the kings and the graves and the Barrow Wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside." Shadows seemed to pass by the window, and the hobbits glanced hastily through the panes. When they turned again, Goldberry stood in the door behind, framed in light. She held a candle, shielding its flame from the draught with her hand, and the light flowed through it, like sunlight through a white shell. "The rain has ended," she said, "and new waters are running downhill, under the stars. Let us now laugh and be glad." "Let us have food and drink," cried Tom. "Long tales are thirsty, and long listenings hunger." Yes, sweetie? You need food? Yeah? Hold on. I'll be right back to get me some food.
Right. She has food now, if she wants it. She seemed to mostly want pets. Alright, where was I? Long listening's hungry work morning, noon, evening. With that he jumped out of his chair and with a bound took a candle from the chimney shelf and lit it in the flame that Goldberry held, and he danced about the table. Suddenly he hopped through the door and disappeared. Quickly he returned, bearing a large and laden tray. Then Tom and Goldberry sat at the table. The hobbits sat half in wonder and half in laughter. So fair was the grace of Goldberry, and so merry and odd the caperings of Tom. Yet in some fashion they seemed to weave a single dance, neither hindering the other, in and out of the room and round about the table, and with great speed food and vessels and lights were set in order. The boards blazed with candles white and yellow. Tom bowed to his guests. "Supper is ready," said Goldberry. Now the hobbit saw that she was clothed all in silver with a white girdle, and her shoes were like fish's mail. But Tom was all in clean blue, blue as rain-washed forget-me-nots, and he had green stockings. It was a supper even better than before. The hobbits were under the spell of Tom's words, may have missed one meal or many, for when the food was before them it seemed at least a week since they had eaten. They did not sing or even speak much for a while, paid close attention to business, but after a time their hearts and spirit rose high again, and their voices rang out in mirth and laughter. After they had eaten, Goldberry sang many songs for them, songs that began merrily in the hills and fell softly down into silence, and in the silences they saw in their minds pools and waters wider than they had ever known, and looking into them they saw the sky below them, and the stars like jewels in the depths. Then once again, thank you for that, welcome back. Wait, I lost where I was. Stars like jewels in the depths. Then once more she wished them each good night, and left them by the fireside. But Tom now seemed wide awake and plied them with questions. He appeared already to know much about them and all their families, and indeed to know much of all the history and doings of the Shire down from days hardly remembered among the hobbits themselves. It no longer surprised them, but he made no secret that he owed his recent knowledge largely to Farmer Maggot, whom he seemed to regard as a person of more importance than they had imagined. "There's earth under his old feet, and clay on his fingers, wisdom in his bones, and both his eyes are open," said Tom. It was clear that Tom had dealings with the elves, and it seemed that in some fashion news had reached him from Gildor concerning the flight of Frodo. Indeed, so much did Tom know, and so cunning was his questioning, that Frodo found himself telling him more than Bilbo and his own hopes and fears than he had told before even to Gandalf. Tom wagged his head up and down, and there was a glint in his eyes
when he heard of the riders. "Show me the precious ring," he said suddenly in the midst of the story, and Frodo, to his astonishment, drew out the chain from his pocket, and unfastening the ring, handed it at once to Tom. It seemed to grow larger as it lay for a moment on his big brown-skinned hand. Then suddenly he put it to his eye and laughed. For a second the hobbits had a vision, both comical and alarming, of the bright blue eye gleaming through a circle of gold. Then Tom put the ring round the end of his little finger and held it up to the candlelight. For a moment the hobbits noticed nothing strange about this. Then they gasped. There was no sign of Tom disappearing. Tom laughed again, and then he spun the ring in the air, and it vanished with a flash. Frodo gave a cry, and Tom leaned forward and handed it back to him with a smile. Frodo looked at it closely and rather suspiciously, like one who was lent a trinket to a juggler. It was the same ring, or looked the same and weighed the same, for the ring had always seemed to Frodo to weigh strangely heavy in the hand, but something prompted him to make sure. He was perhaps a trifle annoyed with Tom for seeming to make so light of what even Gandalf thought so perilously important. He waited for an opportunity, and when the talk was going again, and Tom was telling an absurd story about badgers and their queer ways, then he slipped the ring on. Merry turned towards him to say something and gave a start, and checked an exclamation. Frodo was delighted in a way. It was his own ring all right, for Merry was staring blankly in his chair and obviously could not see him. He got up and crept quietly away from his friend from the fireside towards the outer door. "Hey there!" cried Tom, glancing towards him with a most seeing look in his shining eyes. "Hey, come Frodo there! Where are you a-going? Old Tom Bombadil's not as blind as that yet. Take off your golden ring. Your hand's more fair without it. Come back. Leave your game and sit down beside me. We must talk a while more, and think about the morning. Tom must teach the right road, and keep your feet from wandering." Frodo laughed, trying to feel pleased. Taking off the ring, he came and sat down again. Tom now told them that he reckoned the sun would shine tomorrow, and would be a glad morning, and setting out would be hopeful. But they would do well to start early, for weather in that country was a thing that even Tom could not be sure of for long, and it would change sometimes quicker than he could change the jacket. "I am no weather master," he said, "nor is aught that goes on two legs." It is advice they decided to make nearly due north from his house, over the western and lower slopes of the downs. They might hope in that way to strike the east road in a day's journey and avoid the burrows. He told them not to be afraid, but to mind their own business. Keep to the green grass, don't go meddling with old stone or cold weights or prying in their houses, unless you be strange folk with hearts that never falter. He said this more than once, and he advised that to pass burrows on their west side if they chanced to stray near one. Then he taught them a rhyme to sing if they be ill luck fall into any danger or difficulty the next day. "Ho, Tom Bombadilio, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." When they had sung this all together after him, he clapped them each on the shoulder with a laugh, and taking candles, led them back to their bedroom. And that was the end of chapter 7. I'll take a sippy real quick. And next we shall start onto chapter 8, Fog on the Burrow Downs. That night they heard no noises, but either in his dreams or out of them, he could not tell which, Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light beyond a grey rune curtain, and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back, and a far green country opened before them under a swift sunrise. The vision melted into waking, and there was Tom whistling like a tree full of birds, and the sun was already slanting down the hill and through the open window. Outside, everything was green and pale gold. After breakfast, which they again ate alone, they made ready to say farewell, and nearly heavy of heart was possible on such a morning, cool, bright, and clean under a washed autumn sky of thin blue. The air came fresh from the northwest. Their quiet ponies were almost frisky, sniffing and moving restlessly. Tom came out of the house and waved his hat and danced upon the doorstep, bidding the hobbits to get up and be off and go with good speed. They rode off along the path and wound away from behind the house, and went slanting up towards the north end of the hill brow under which it sheltered. They had just dismounted to lead their ponies up the last steep slope when suddenly Frodo stopped. "Goldberry," he cried, "my fair lady, clad in all silver green, we have never said farewell to her, nor seen her face since the evening." He had so distressed that he turned back, but the moment a clear call came rippling down, there on the hill brow she stood beckoning to them. Her hair was flying loose, and as it caught the sun it shone and shimmered. A light like the glint of water on dewy grass flashed from under her feet as she danced. They hastened up the last slope and stood breathless beside her. They bowed, but with a wave of her arm she bade them look around, and they looked up from the hilltop over lands under the morning. It was now clear and far seen, as it had been veiled and misty when they stood upon the knoll in the forest, which could now be seen rising pale and green out of the dark trees in the west. In that direction the land arose in wooded ridges, green-yellow russet under the sun, beyond which lay hidden the valley of the Brandywine. To the south, over the line of the Withywindle, there was a distant glint like pale grass, where Brandywine River made a great loop in the low lands and flowed away out to the knowledge of the hobbits. Northward, beyond the dwindling downs, that land ran away in flats and swellings of grey and green and pale earth colors, till it faded into a featureless and shadowy distance. Eastward the Barrow Downs rose, ridge behind ridge, into the morning, and vanished out of eyesight into a guess. And it was no more than a guess of blue and a remote white glimmering blending with the hem of the sky, but it spoke to them, out of memory and old tales, of the high and distant mountains. They took a deep draught of the air, and felt a skip and a few stout strides would bear them wherever they wished. It seemed faint-hearted to go jogging aside over their crumpled skirts of the downs towards the road where they should be leaping, as lusty as Tom, over the stepping stones of the hills straight towards the mountains. Goldberry spoke to them and recalled their eyes and thoughts. "Speed now for a guess," she said, "and hold to your purpose. North with the wind in the left eye, and a blessing on your footsteps. Make haste while the sun shines." And to Frodo she said, "Farewell, elf friend." It was a merry meeting. But Frodo found no words to answer. He bowed low, and mounted his pony, and followed by his friends, jogging slowly down the gentle slope behind the hill. Tom Bombadil's house in the valley and the forest were lost to view. The air grew warmer between the green walls of hillside and hillside, and the scent of turf rose strong and sweet as they breathed. Turning back when they reached the bottom of the green hollow, they saw Goldberry, now small and slender, like a sunlit flower against the sky. She was standing still watching them, and her hands were stretched out towards them. As they looked she gave a clear call, and lifting up her hand she turned and vanished down the hill. Their way wound along the floor of the hollow, and round green feet of a steep hill into another deeper and broader valley, and then over the shoulder of further hills, and down their long limbs, and up their smooth sides again, now up on new hilltops and down into new valleys. There was no tree nor any visible water. It was a country of grass and short springy turf, silent except for the whisper of the air over the edges of the land, and high lonely cries of strange birds. As they journeyed the sun mounted and grew hot. Each time they climbed the ridge, a breeze seemed to have grown less. When they caught a glimpse of the country westward, and distant forests seemed to be smoking as if the fallen rain was steaming up again from leaf and root and mold. The shadow now lay round the edge of sight, a dark haze above which the upper sky was like a blue cap, hot and heavy. About midday they came up a hill whose top was wide and flattened, like a shallow saucer with a green mounted rim. Inside there was no air stirring, and the sky seemed near their heads. They rode across and looked northwards. Then their hearts rose, for it seemed plain that they had come further than they had expected. Certainly the distance had now all become hazy and deceptive, but there could be no doubt that the downs were coming to an end. A long valley lay below them, winding away northwards until it came to an opening between two steep boulders. Beyond there seemed to be no more hills. Due north they faintly glimpsed a long dark line. There is a line of trees," said Mary, "and that must mark the road. All along it, for many leagues east of the bridge, there are trees growing. Some say they were planted in the old days. "Splendid," said Frodo. "If we make as good going this afternoon as we have done this morning, we shall have left the downs before the sun sets, and be jogging on in search of a camping place." But even as he spoke he turned his glance eastwards, and he saw that on the side of the hills were higher and looked down upon them, and all those hills were crowned with green mounds, and on some were standing stones, pointing upwards like jagged teeth out of green gums. That view was somehow disquieting. As they turned from sight and went down into the hollow circle, in the midst of it there stood a single stone, standing tall under the sun above, and at this hour casting no shadow. It was shapeless and yet significant, like a landmark or a guiding finger, or more like a warning. But they were now hungry, and the sun was still at the fearless noon, and they set their backs against the east side of the stone. It was cool as if the sun had no power to warm it. But at that time this seemed pleasant. There they took food and drink, and made as good a noon meal under the open sky as anyone could wish, for the food came from down under hill. Tom had provided them with plenty for the comfort of the day, their ponies and burdens staying upon the grass. Riding over the hills and eating their fill, the warm sun and the scent of turf, lying a little too long, stretching out their legs and looking at the sky above their noses, these things are perhaps enough to explain what happened. However that may be, they woke suddenly and comfortably from a sleep they had never meant to take. The standing stone was cold, and it was cast a long pale shadow and stretched eastward over them. The sun, a pale and watery yellow, was gleaming through the mist just above the west wall of the hollow in which they lay. North, south, and east beyond the wall the fog was thick, cold, and white. The air was silent, heavy, and chill. Their ponies were standing crowded together with their heads down. The hobbits sprang to their feet in alarm and ran to the western rim. They found that they were upon an island in the fog. Even as they looked out in dismay towards the setting sun, it sank before their eyes into a white sea, and a cold grey shadow sprang up in the east behind. The fog rolled up to the walls and rose above them. As if mounted, it bent over their heads until it became a roof. They were shut in a hall of mist, whose central pillar was the standing stone. They felt as if a trap was closing about them, and they did not quite lose heart. They still remembered the helpful view they had of the line of the road ahead, and they still knew in which direction it lay. In any case, they now had so great a dislike for the hollow place that the stone, that no thought of remaining there was in their minds. They packed up as quickly as their chilled fingers would work. Soon they were leading the ponies in single file over the rim and down the long northward slope of the hill, down into a foggy sea. As they went down, the mist came colder and damper, and their hair hung lank and dripping on their foreheads. When they reached the bottom of it, so cold, they had halted and got their cloaks and hoods, which soon became bedewed with grey drops. Then, mounting their ponies, they went slowly on again, feeling the way by the rise and fall of the ground. They were steering as well as they could guess for the gate-like opening at the far northward end of the long valley which they had seen in the morning. Once they were through the gap, they had only to keep on in anything like a straight line, and they were bound in the end to strike the road. Their thoughts did not go beyond that, except for a vague hope that perhaps away beyond the downs there might be no fog. Their going was very slow. To prevent their getting separated and wandering in different directions, they went in file, with Frodo leading. Sam was behind them, and after him came Pippin and Merry. The valley seemed to stretch on endlessly. Suddenly Frodo saw a hopeful sign. On either side ahead a darkness began to loom through the mist, and he guessed that they were at last approaching the gap in the hills. The north gate of the Burrow Downs. If they could pass that, they would be free. "Come on, follow me," he called back over his shoulder, and he hurried forward. But his hope soon changed to bewilderment and alarm. The dark patches grew darker, but they shrank, and suddenly he saw, towering ominous before him, and leaning slightly towards one another like the pillars of a headless door, two huge standing stones. He could not remember having seen any sign of these in the valley, and he looked out from the hill in the morning. He had passed between them almost before he was aware, and even as he did so darkness seemed to fall around him. His pony reared and snorted, and he fell off. Then he looked back. He found that he was alone. The others had not followed him. "Sam!" he cried. "Pippin! Merry! Come along, why don't you keep up?" There was no answer. Fear took him, and he ran back past the stone, shouting wildly, "Sam! Sam! Mary! Pippin!" The pony bolted into the mist and vanished. From some way off, or so it seemed, he thought he heard a cry, "Hoy, Frodo, hoy!" It was away eastward, on his left, as he stood under the great stone, staring and straining into the gloom. He plunged off in the direction of the call and found himself going steeply uphill. As he struggled on he called again, and kept on calling more and more frantically, but he heard no answer for some time, and then it seemed faint and far ahead and high above him. "Frodo, hoy!" came the thin voices out of the mist, and then a cry that sounded like a "help, help," often repeated. Ending with a last "help," he trailed off into a long wail, suddenly cut short. He stumbled forward in all the speed he could toward the cries, but the light was now gone, and clinging night had closed about him, so that it was impossible to be sure of any direction. He seemed all the time to be climbing up and up. Only the change in the level of the ground at his feet told him when he at last came to the top of a ridge or hill. He was weary, sweating, and yet chilled. It was wholly dark. "Where are you?" he cried out miserably. There was no reply. He stood listening. He was suddenly aware that it was getting very cold, and that up here a wind was beginning to blow, an icy wind. A change was coming in the weather. The mist was flowing past him now in shreds and tatters. His breath was smoking, and the darkness was less near and thick. He looked up and saw with surprise that faint stars were appearing overhead, amid the strands of hurrying cloud and fog. The wind began to hiss over the grass. He imagined suddenly that he caught a muffled cry, and he made towards it, and even as he went forward the mist was rolled up and thrust aside, and the starry sky was unveiled. A glance showed him that he was now facing southwards and was on a round hilltop, which he must have climbed from the north. Out of the east the biting wind was blowing. To his right there loomed against the westward stars a deep black shape. A great burrow stood there. "Where are you?" he cried again, both angry and afraid. "Here," said a voice deep and cold that seemed to come out of the ground. "I am waiting for you." "No," said Frodo, but he did not run away. His knees gave and he fell on the ground. Nothing happened, and there was no sound. Trembling, he looked up, in time to see a tall dark figure like shadow against the stars. It leaned over him. He thought there were two eyes, very cold, though lit with a pale light that seemed to come from some remote distance. Then a grip stronger and colder than iron seized him. The icy touch froze his bones, and he remembered no more. When he came to himself again, for a moment he could recall nothing except a sense of dread. Then suddenly he knew that he was imprisoned, cut hopelessly. He was in a burrow. A burrow weight had taken him, and he was probably already under the dreadful spells of the burrowites, about which whispered tales spoke. He dared not move, and lay, as he found himself, flat on his back upon a cold stone, with his hands on his breast. He thought his fear was so great that it seemed to be part of the very darkness that was round him. He found himself, as he lay, thinking about Bilbo Baggins and his stories, or their jogging along together in the lanes of the Shire, and talking about roads and adventures. There is a seed of courage hidden, often deeply, it is true, in the heart of the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor very timid indeed, though he did not know it. Bilbo and Gandalf had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire. He thought he had come to the end of his adventure, and a terrible end, but the thought hardened him. He found himself stiffening, as if for a final spring. He no longer felt limp like a helpless prey. As he lay there, thinking and getting hold of himself, he noticed all at once that the darkness was slowly giving way. A pale greenish light was growing round him. It did not at first show him what kind of place he was in, for the light seemed to be coming out of himself, and from the floor beside him, and had not yet reached the roof or wall. He turned, and there in the cold glow he saw lying behind him Sam, Pippin, and Mary. They were on their backs, and their faces looked deathly pale, and they were clad in white. About them lay many treasures, of gold maybe, though as if that light they looked cold and unlovely. On their heads were circlets, gold chains were about their waists, and on their fingers were many rings. Swords lay by their sides, and shields were at their feet, but across their 3 necks lay one long naked sword. Suddenly a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of a sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves. Grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars will die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. He heard behind his head a creaking and scraping sound. Raising himself on one arm he looked, and saw now in the pale light that there were in a kind of passage which began and turned a corner. Round the corner a long arm was groping, walking on its fingers towards Sam, who was lying nearest, and towards the hilt of the sword that lay upon him. At first Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring whether the Barrow Right would miss him, and he might find some way out. He thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit that there had been nothing else he could do, but the courage that had been awakened to him was now too strong. He could not leave his friend so easily. He wavered, groping in his pocket, and then fought with himself again, and he did so. The arm crept nearer. Suddenly resolve hearted him this time. He seized a short sword that lay beside him, and kneeling he stooped low over the bodies of his companions. With what sight he had, he hewed at the crawling arm near the wrist, and the hand broke off. But at the same moment the sword splintered up to the hilt. There was a shriek, and the light vanished. In the dark there was a snarling noise. Frodo fell forward over Merry, and Merry's face felt cold. All at once, back into his mind, from which it had disappeared, from the first coming of the fog, came the memory of the house down under the hill, and of Tom singing. He remembered the rhyme that Tom had taught him. In a small desperate voice he began, "Ho, Tom Bombadil," and with that name his voice seemed to grow strong. It was a full and lively sound, and the dark chamber echoed as if to drum and trumpet. "Ho, Tom Bombadilio, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." There was a sudden deep silence in which Frodo could hear his heart beating. After a long slow moment he heard plain, but far away, as if it was coming down through the ground and through thick walls, an answering voice singing. "Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster." There was a loud rumbling sound as the stones rolling and following, and suddenly light streamed in, real light, the plain light of day. A low door-like opening appeared on the end of the chamber beyond Frodo's feet, and there was Tom's head, hat, feather, and all, framed against the light of the sun, rising red behind him. The light fell, opened the floor, and opened the faces of the 3 hobbits lying beside Frodo. They did not stir, but the sickly hue had left them. They looked now as if they had only very deeply asleep. Tom stooped, removed his hat, and came into the dark chamber singing. "Get out, you old Right, vanish in the sunlight, shrivel like the cold mist, like the winds go wailing, out into the barren lands far beyond the mountains. Come never here again, leave your burrow empty, lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand for ever shut till the ground is mended." At those words there was a cry, and part of the inner end of the chamber fell with a crash. Then there was a long trailing shriek, fading away into the unguessable distance, and after them silence. "Come, friend Frodo," said Tom, "let us get out of the clean grass. You must help me bear them." Together they carried Merry, Pippin, and Sam. As Frodo left the burrow for the last time, he thought he saw a severed hand wriggling still, like a wounded spider, in a heap of fallen earth. Tom went back in again, and there was a sound of much thumping and stamping. Then he came out. He was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure, things gold, silver, copper, and bronze, many beads and chains and jeweled ornaments. He climbed the green burrow and laid them all on top of the sunshine. And there he stood, with his hat in his hand and the wind in his hair, and looked down upon the 3 hobbits that had been laid on their backs upon the grass at the west side of the mound. Raising his right hand, he said in a clear and commanding voice, "Wake now, my merry lads, wake and hear me calling. Warm now be heart and limb, the cold stone is falling. Dark door is standing wide, dead hand is broken. Night under night is flown, and the gate is open." To Frodo's great joy, the hobbits stirred, stretching their arms, rubbing their eyes, and suddenly sprang up. They looked about in amazement, first at Frodo, then at Tom, standing large as life on the burrow top above them, and then at themselves in their thin white rags, crowned and belted with pale gold, and jingling their trinkets. "What in the name of wonder," began Merry, feeling the golden circlet that had slipped over one eye. Then he stopped, and a shadow came over his face, and he closed his eyes. "Of course I remember," he said. "The men of Carn Dum came on us at night, and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart!" He clutched at his breast. "No, no," he said, opening his eyes. "What am I saying? I've been dreaming. Where did you get to, Frodo?" "I thought that I was lost," said Frodo, "but I don't want to speak of it. Let us think of what we are to do now. Let us go on." "Dressed up like this, sir," said Sam. "Where are my clothes?" He flung the circlet, belt, and rings on the grass, and looked around helplessly, as if he expected to find his cloak, jacket, and breeches, and other hobbit garments lying somewhere to hand. "You won't find your clothes again," said Tom, bounding down from the mound, and laughing as he danced round them in the sunlight. One would have thought that nothing dangerous or dreadful had happened, and indeed the horror faded out of their hearts as they looked at him, and saw the merry glint in his eyes. "What do you mean?" asked Pippin, looking at him half puzzled and half amused. "Why not?" But Tom shook his head, saying, "You found yourselves again out of the deep water. Clothes are but little loss if you escape from drowning. Be glad, my merry friends, and let the warm sunlight heat now heart and limb. Cast off these old cold rags. Run naked on the grass while Tom goes a-hunting." He sprang away down the hill, whistling and calling. Looking down after him, Frodo saw him running away southwards along the green hollow between their hill and the next, still whistling and crying. "Hey now, come hoy now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near or far, here, there, or yonder? Sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail and bumpkin, white socks, my little lad, and old fatty lumpkin." So he sang, running fast, tossing up his hat and catching it, until he was hidden by a fold of the ground. But for some time his "Hey now, hoy now" came floating back down the wind, where it had shifted round towards the south.
Welcome in, Sophia. Hope you're well today.
The air was growing very warm again. The hobbits ran about for a while on the grass, and he told them. Then they lay basking in the sun, and the delight of those that have been wafted suddenly from bitter winter to a friendly clime, or of people that, after being long ill and bedridden, wake one day to find that they are unexpectedly well, and the day is full again of promise. By the time that Tom returned, they were feeling strong and hungry. He reappeared at first over the brow of the hill, and behind him came in an obedient line 6 ponies, their own 5 and one more. The last one was plainly old Fatty Lumpkin. He was larger, stronger, and fatter, and older than the other ponies. Mary, to whom the others belonged, had not, in fact, given them any such names, but they answered to the new names that Tom had given them for the rest of their lives. Tom called them one by one, and they climbed over the brow and stood in a line. Then Tom bowed to the hobbits. "Here are your ponies now," he said. "They've more sense in some ways than you wandering hobbits have, more sense in their noses, for they sniff danger ahead which you walk right into, and if they run to save themselves, then they run the right way. You must forget them all, for though their hearts are faithful, to face fear of burrow weights is not what they were made for. See, here they come again, bringing all their burdens." Mary, Sam, and Pippin now clothed themselves in spare garments from their packs, and they soon felt too hot, for they were obliged to put on some of the thicker and warmer things that they had brought along the oncoming of winter. "Where does the old animal, the fatty lumpkin, come from?" asked Frodo. "He's mine," said Tom, "my four-legged friend, though I seldom ride him, and he wanders often far, free upon the hillsides. When your ponies stayed with me, they got to know my lumpkin, and they smelt him in the night and quickly ran to meet him. I thought he'd look for them, and with his words of wisdom take all their fear away. But now my jolly lumpkin old Tom's going to ride. Hey, he's coming with you, just to set you on the road, so he needs a pony. For you cannot easily talk to hobbits that are riding, when you're on your own legs trying to trot beside them." The hobbits were delighted to hear this, and thanked Tom many times, but they laughed and said that they were so good at losing themselves that he would not feel happy till he had seen them safe over the borders of his land. "I've got things to do," he said, "my making and my singing, my talking and my walking, and my watching of the country. But Tom can't be always near to open doors and willow cracks. Tom has his house to mind and gold berries waiting." It was still fairly early by the sun, something between 9 and 10, and the hobbits turned their minds to food. Their last meal had been lunch beside the Standing Stone the day before. They breakfasted now off the remainder of Tom's provisions, meant for their supper, with additions that Tom had brought with him. It was not a large meal, considering hobbits and the circumstances, but they felt much better for it. While they were eating, Tom went up to the mound and looked through the treasures. Most of these he had made into a pile that glistened and sparkled on the grass. He bade them lie there, free to all finders, birds and beasts, elves or men, and all kindly creatures, for so the spell of the mound should be broken and scattered, and no wight ever come back to it. He chose for himself from the pile a brooch set with blue stones, many shaded like flax flowers, and 4 wings of blue butterflies. He looked long at it, and if stirred by some memory, shaking his head and pointing at last, "Here is a pretty toy for Tom and for his lady. Fair was she who long ago wore this on her shoulder. Goldberry shall wear it now, and we will not forget her." For each of the hobbits he chose a dagger long, leaf-shaped and keen, of marvelous workmanship, damasked with serpent forms in red and gold. They gleamed as he drew them from their black sheaths, wrought of some strange metal, light and strong, and set with many fiery stones. Whether by some virtue in these seas, or because of the spell they lay on the mound, the blades seemed untouched by time, unrusted, sharp and glittering in the sun. "Old knives are long enough as swords for hobbit people," he said. "Sharp blades are good to have as sharp folk go walking east, south, or far away into dark and danger." Then he told them that these blades were forged many long years ago by men or Wilderness. They were foes of the Dark Lord, but they were overcome by the evil king of Carndom in the land of Agmar. "For now, remember them," said Tom murmured. "Yet still some go wandering, sons of forgotten kings, walking in loneliness, guarding from evil things, folk and that are heedless." The hobbits did not understand his words, but as he spoke they had a vision, as it were, of a great expanse of years behind them, like a vast shadowy plain over which there strode shapes of men, tall and grim, with bright swords, and last came one with a star on his brow. Then the vision faded, and they were back in the sunlit world. It was time to start again. They made ready, packing their bags and lading their ponies. Their new weapons they hung on their leather belts upon their jackets, feeling them very awkward, and wondering if they would be of any use. Fighting had not before occurred to any of them as one of the adventures in which their fight would land them. At last they set off. They led their ponies down the hill, and then, mounting, they trotted quickly along the valley. They looked back and saw the top of the old mound on the hill, and from it the sunlight on the gold went up like a yellow flame. Then they turned a shoulder of the downs, and it was hidden from view. Though Frodo looked about him on every side, he saw no sign of the great stone standing like a gate, and before long they came to the northern gap and rode swiftly through, and the land fell away before them. It was a messy journey, with Tom Bombadil trotting gaily beside them, or before them on Flatty Lumpkin, who could move much faster than his girth promised. Tom sang most of the time, but it was chiefly nonsense, or else perhaps a strange language unknown to the hobbits, or ancient language whose words were mainly those of wonder and delight. They went forward steadily, but they soon saw that the road was further away than they had imagined. Even without a fog, their sleep at midday would have prevented them from reaching it until after nightfall on the day before. The dark line they had seen was not a line of trees, but a line of bushes growing on the edge of a deep dike with a steep wall on the further side. Tom said that it had once been a boundary of a kingdom, but a very long time ago. He seemed to remember something sad about it, and that would not say much. They climbed down now the dike and through a gap in the wall, and then Tom turned due north, and they had been bearing somewhat to the west. The land was now open and fairly level, and they quickened their pace, but the sun was already sinking low when they last saw a line of tall trees ahead, and they knew that they had come back to the road after many unexpected adventures. They galloped their ponies over the last furlongs and halted under the long shadow of the trees. There was on the top of the sloping bank, and the road, now dim as evening drew on, wound away below them. At this point it ran nearly from southwest to northeast, and on their right it fell quickly down into a wide hollow. It was rutted and bore many signs of the recent heavy rain. There were pools and potholes full of water. They rode down the bank and looked up and down. There was nothing to be seen. "Well, here we are again at last," said Frodo. "I suppose we haven't lost more than 2 days by my short cut through the forest. Perhaps delay will prove useful. It may have put them off our trail." The others looked at him. The shadow of fear of the Black Riders suddenly came over them again. Ever since they had entered the forest, they had thought chiefly of getting back to the road. Only now, when it lay beneath their feet, they remembered the danger which pursued them, and was more than likely to be lying in wait for them upon the road itself. They looked anxiously back toward the setting sun, but the road was brown and empty. "Do you think," said Pippin hesitatingly, "do you think we may be pursued tonight?" "No, I hope not tonight," answered Tom Bombadil, "nor perhaps the next day. But do not trust my guess, for I cannot tell for certain. Out east my knowledge fails. Tom is not master of riders from the black lands far beyond his country. All the same, the hobbits wished he had been coming with them. They felt that he would know how to deal with black riders if anyone did. They would soon now be going forward into lands wholly strange to them, and beyond all but the most vague and distant legends of the Shire. And in the gathering twilight they longed for home. A deep loneliness and sense of loss was on them. They stood silent, reluctant to make the final parting, and only slowly became aware that Tom was wishing them farewell, and telling them to have good heart and to ride on till dark without halting. "Tom will give you good advice till the day is over. After that your own luck must go with you and guide you. 4 miles along the road you'll come upon a village, Bree under Bree Hill, the doors looking westward, and you'll find an old inn that is called the Prancing Pony. Burlyman Butterbar is a worthy keeper. There you can stay the night, and afterwards the morning will speed you upon your way. Be bold but wary, keep up your merry hearts, and ride to meet your fortune." They begged him to come at least as far as the inn, and drink once more with them, and he laughed and refused, saying, "Tom's country ends here. He will not pass the borders. Tom has his house and mine, and Goldberry is waiting." Then he turned, tossed up his hat, leapt on Lumpkin's back, and rode up over the bank and away, singing into the dusk. The hobbits climbed up and watched him until he was out of sight. "I am sorry to take leave of Master Bombadil," said Sam. "He's a caution and no mistake. I reckon we may go a good deal further, and we see not better, not queerer. But I won't deny I'll be glad to see the prancing pony he spoke of. I hope it'll be like the Green Dragon away back home. What sort of folk are they in Bree?" "There are hobbits in Bree," said Mary, "as well as big folk. I dare say it will be homelike enough. The Pony is a good inn by all accounts. My people ride out there now and again." "It'll be all we could wish," said Frodo, "but it is outside the Shire all the same. Don't make yourselves too much at home. Please remember, all of you, that the name of Baggins must not be mentioned. I am Mr. Underhill, if any name must be given." They now mounted their ponies and rode off silently into the evening. Darkness came down quickly, and they plodded slowly downhill and up again, until at last they saw lights twinkling some distance ahead. Before them rose Bree Hill, barring the way, a dark mass against misty stars, and under its western flank nestled a large village. Towards it they now hurried, desiring only to find a fire, and a door between them and the night. That was the end of that chapter. Next up will be chapter 9, but for today I will stop there. We reached 2 hours, and I think 3 hours in 2 hours of story is a good amount. I don't want to push my voice too much. I was thinking of only going an hour or hour and a half, but I pushed forward to get through another chapter and get to 2 hours anyway. So I will, really quick, for those who were not here earlier or yesterday, give a reminder that I have started a donathon to help with Beast vet bills. That's what the stuff on screen has been today. We reached the first 3 goals yesterday, thankfully, but we still have quite a bit ways to go because there was quite a few bills. And I appreciate everyone who has donated thus far and plan to in the future or are even considering it. It helps me and Bea very, very much. And also, to clarify, she is better now. These are just to help with the bills. She's had several appointments over the past couple months. Had her last one this week, and they said she's all better. So Bea is nice and healthy. Enjoyed listening to the reading. I'm glad. Really loving the reading streams, Bea. Thank you for taking the time to read to us. I wish I could read longer, but my voice won't let me. Humans aren't made to speak constantly for such long periods at a time. But I'd say we are on page... We'll be starting 146. So we're not even halfway through, but we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. Slowly we'll do probably 3 to 6 chapters a week, depending on the length of the chapters. I try to do like 30 to 50 pages a time. So hopefully we'll get this book done maybe by the start of the new year. And then we'll be moving on to the second book in the series, and then the third book, and that'll probably last us probably to summer. Oh gosh, we got a long journey ahead of us, but I hope that you'll be there with me for it. The amount is good for us, as long as you don't hurt your voice. I did reading on Monday because I knew that I was going to be doing her appointment and stuff Tuesday and Wednesday. So I'll be trying to do reading before days where I can take at least a day or 2 off for my voice, because it very much is needed. So tomorrow will be movie day. We'll be watching movies in the Discord, and that'll be fun. And I'll probably get my schedule out for the next week, either tomorrow or Monday. Depending on my throat, I might take Monday off as well. And I might have something scheduled for Tuesday. We shall see. But thank you all for joining me today. I love you all very, very much. If you are heading to sleep, good night, cheek kisses for you. Let me see if there's anybody saved to read. No one doing ASMR. Oh, I know, Dearly You is. So I shall read her. And see you guys later. Love you. Bye.
Why, love you, love you, love you. Why? I need to close